First item is our VITA H2O project presented by Deputy Public Works Director Meagan Smith and Brett Waller, FrontRange H2O. Thank you guys for being here, and apologies for my tardiness. Take it away.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. Thanks so much. I'm excited to have Brent and his team, and we'll go through some introductions in just a minute, but I wanted to take a quick second. Is it capturing voices? Just okay. I just want to take a quick second to kind of ground this presentation and some of our ongoing water supply planning and efforts that we've had in front of the board recently, historically, and even as recently as just the last couple of regular meetings. Really, tonight's session is intended to introduce you to the VITA project and the associated team. It's an informational, this is a work session, so we're not looking for any action this evening. But we have been working through several points that were identified in our water source development plan over the last year or so, implementing some policy guidance and suggestions as recently as our last regular meeting. And throughout our efforts to implement that water source development plan, we've really been consistent in identifying our three priorities, which have consistently been diversifying our water sources, improving our long-term cost predictability, which is a thorn on our side, speaking of roses and thorns, and then reducing dependence on a single source of supply. So again, kind of like doubling down on that diversification. One thing to note, as we look ahead for our water supply planning, we are not in a position to just be concerned about bridging a gap for our future growth needs. We really are in a position of having to consider options that can replace over the long term, but replace a bulk of our contract water supplies that we currently receive through this 1983 agreement with North Put Irrigation Company. Staff has been evaluating the projects that are identified through the water source development plan. And one of these opportunities is the VITA H2O project. This is a regional non-tributary groundwater project based on the Upper Laramie Aquifer, which I will let Brent and his team dive into more of that. But again, really just looking to make sure that we have an opportunity to learn about this project, understand that it's real, have the opportunity to hear from the project team and maybe consider some of the concerns, risks, questions that you would have. We're not looking again for action this evening, but we will be looking for some guidance from the board at the end and priming some discussion questions as we go along. I know Brent is keen on introducing his team, and also he does a great job on presenting this topic.
Thanks for setting me up.
They've been road showing a bit around here in Northern Colorado. Yeah. And with that, I do want to turn it over to Brent, and I'm going to invite some of the folks that he has with him to come up and sit at this table. So they're here to field some questions, and I'm going to hover real close.
Sure.
Okay. And I'm going to let him go through those introductions.
Guys.
All right, gentlemen, there's a seat for
each
of you. And your matching shirt.
Got the memo. Right.
Engineering.
Yeah. So thanks to the board for having us tonight, and we do appreciate the opportunity to present the VITA project. One of the things I have on the first slide here is some themes that we talk about all the time about the VITA H2O project. First and foremost, the VITA is Latin for life, so that's we felt it was very important to have a brand and a label for the project that everybody could identify with it. So it's not just, quote, FrontRange H2O, it is the VITA H2O project. And as you see there's the QR code you're more than welcome to scan, as well as the websites that change and get updated constantly. So that is important. We do maintain some blogs that we're doing now. We also maintain some social media that I think I would encourage you guys to follow if you haven't. Also, would love to add you, if you haven't, to the milestones update list. So we send out monthly milestones. If you haven't been receiving, we'll be glad to add your email to that. I think that's important. And then the themes at the top here. So we are headquartered in Loveland. We launched in 2022 as a company, specifically for this particular water source. We also are very proud to say that our project team is based here in Colorado. One of the key elements that I've been part of historically is nothing wrong with household names and big institutional contractors. Don't have anything against those folks, but I've always felt like local and folks that I know can execute, and that's some of the guys here today. So I'll go to my right is John Warren, is president of Connell Resources. I think you guys know know him well. I've got John Tucker to my left, who is the CEO of Moltz Construction. His company's been awarded the construction for the water treatment plant. So, and then on the far left is Lee Lindeen. He is the principal at Providence Infrastructure Consultants, PIC is what we call them. They are the lead engineers for the project. And all these guys have been part of the team, a key element. John just joined, just was awarded the RFP for that, so we're glad to have him. But I'll also share with you guys the full team on the next slide going forward. Now, on the 10 years, I think this is important, and from water, you guys would appreciate water's not easy, as you know, and this project started 10 years ago, where we first engaged some of the water rights owners in this area. And so by the time, 6 years ago, and by the time we finish and deliver that first wet water, it'll be a full 10 years. And that's pretty normal for water. So if you don't have the appetite and the patience, it's not the business to be in. And so our group has been very committed. Part of the solution, we're not the solution for the region. We are a part of it. And we talk about that last point, conjunctive use. Yes, it's groundwater, but it is also just part of the solution. It's a lot of our engagements and our current client base it's about drought. It's about firming tools. It's about smart stewardship of the resource. And so we're part of the solution. The other one I think is important for the board here is flatten the curve. That's a phrase we don't take lightly. Once this system is in place and the infrastructure is in place, it will flatten the rate curves. As you all know, water gets more and more expensive and has. We think the low-hanging fruit for surface and tributary sources is slowly going away. And so part of that is having a fixed system in place with a 100-year decreed resource, but if you manage it properly, and we'll show you this, you can easily get to 400 years of management. And that's a key element. Again, the last bullet point, conjunctive use, extend, reuse, and store. So conjunctive use, as I said earlier, combine it with your surface resources, with your tributary resources. Use it. Extend means that this is a 100-year decreed water, but if you don't use it, it gets extended. You can bank it. It's not a use or lose decree. So if one year you're using 50% of what you have, that 50% rolls to the next year and so forth and so on. So that's a key element too, is from an extension standpoint. Reuse. This is a non-tributary water resource. And in the regulations, you can use it to extinction. So I think Wellington, as we looked at the system that you have in place today, I think this speaks loudly to what you can do to leverage this water in the reuse program. So it's not you do your first use, and then how can you leverage and manage in an integrated water plan the additional uses? Economically, a second use, you'll lose about 15% if you process and treat, so you're effluent. So again, 15%, another 15%. We're modeling it out at 20% to stay conservative. But again, I think if you model it and you manage it, this resource could be reused 3-4 times economically before it starts to lose its what I call the molecule. But that's a very important point on the reuse. And then store. Part of the element of the regional aspect of this is using the ability to push water back to the aquifer. And so we design, and the treatment plan in the future will be part of treatment to do storage back. ASR is what they call it, aquifer storage and recovery. That's certainly in the plan. Our current main client, Fort Collins 11 Water District, doesn't see utilizing that for probably 15 years. I don't see how soon you guys will be using it, but it's there. And we will be managing that into a storage program. We're building and designing the wells for recharging for sure. So everything we're building is bi-directional. Water comes, water can go back. Next slide. Yeah, go
Brent,
ahead.
you've got the clicker right next to you.
Oh.
On your left. That little tiny thing.
Just the arrow
One of the buttons.
Down.
Yeah.
down. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Megan. In the presentation we provided, these are actual links to the team. Once again, as I mentioned, just real quick, the VITA H2O project, we're based here in Loveland, right off of 25 and Crossroads. Love to anytime stop by to see us. Connell is here. They're based here in Fort Collins, Windsor. Maltz is in Windsor. And then we have Telesto Solutions. Telesto is, so let me say, Connell is building all the pipeline construction. We're how many miles you said earlier?
5 miles laid out and fused together.
So they are our pipeline construction team. They're moving much faster than I thought, so I got to budget that. Then we have Maltz, as I said earlier, has been awarded the water treatment plant construction, and I'll show you a map here where that's going. Telesto is our hydrology team. They're the team that is leading all things for the adjudication of our ranch water that we have today. Plus, they did all the adjudication for the Lazy D water rights, which we now own, and we'll talk about that. Down below, the recording is hiding a couple of things, but Providence, Leland Dean is the principal of Providence, but the project manager or engineering manager for the project is actually Kevin Metter. He's on vacation this week, but he lives in Tinmouth. He's a future customer of this water, so we always give him a hard time. If he messes up, he's going to be having to deal with his own water. And then you can't see below, but we have our Spheros is head of all things water quality, as well as our ASR program. Greenberg Targ is our Denver water lawyer, native Coloradan. Chris Thorne, very good water lawyer. And then a key element to the treatment is the primary treatment is ion exchange, and that company's WRT, and they're down in help me out, Lee.
Broomfield.
The Broomfield, yeah, that's correct. So and they're headquartered there. So visually on the map, we'll start there. The full colored sections that you see at the top is the Lazy D Ranch. And the Lazy D Grazing Association Ranch. Down below in the lighter shaded sections is our ranch, the FrontRange H2O Ranch or FrontRange Land and Cattle. The Lazy D water, as it says on here, is the decreed water. So this is, as Meagan mentioned, this is a groundwater, non-tributary groundwater project that includes treatment, reuse, and also conveyance. So this is a package deal that we felt was important to bring to the market to take some of the issues around treatment for sure, but also conveyance. So that's part of the whole project. It is the upper Laramie Aquifer. So if any of you are not familiar with it, it's ancient water. It's quite frankly has never been tapped for Coloradans. The Wyoming side, they've been using it. They're using it now. They have been. And so about 2/3 of the aquifer is on the Colorado side. So we feel it's important that it's a great resource for Colorado and should be used. 23,766 acre feet year total, of which the fully decreed would be the 19,466. For the town of Wellington, based on current contracts and other contracts in the works, more than likely your water would come from the southern section of Lazy D. Part of it might come from our ranch because of the connectivity and the logistics, because that's important. And again, the water rights cover 31,000 surface acres, and that's important for a lot of reasons on the groundwater front. So we cover a lot of ground. Our current contract with Fort Collins Love and Water District, which is the blue line, you see the blue line, that's the VITA line. That's from the STAR, which is the water treatment plant that John and his team will be building. I will say also, John and his team will also be building out all the well field, topside well field for us as well. We're from the water treatment plant, the purple star, the little tiny purple star there, to the blue star is roughly about 24 plus miles.
Yeah.
Yep, 24 plus. That is going to be our first delivery in Q1 of 29 to Fort Collins Love and Water District for roughly 2,600 acre feet a year. Their intention is not to use all of that every year. Their intention, again, is primarily a drought and firming tool. They don't have this type of water in their portfolio. So it is, again, going back to the conjunctive use. It's a very important part of that for them. By the way, I don't know what the ground rules are. If you guys want to stop and ask any questions, Phil, just please let me know. Part of that contract is also a 100-year operating agreement. So one of the key elements was, okay, who's going to operate and how long and what are the rules of that? And so I think the team did a very good job putting that contract together. And so under that contract, the cost, it's a cost plus. So whatever the cost is, that's what gets paid. And so the more participants, so in terms of Wellington, for example, participating along with Fort Collins, it gets better for everybody from an operating procedure process. And we do intend to bring some others as offtakes. So there will be a sharing of those costs. Phase one is 6 million gallons a day. We have filed our permits for the water treatment plant at 5,000 acre feet a year, which equates to that 6 MGD. All the easements for the blue line that you see are acquired. So we're busy building and we're coming south. The last point on this slide for a project overview is it's not a buy and dry project. As we all know, that's a very sensitive issue. This is, again, if you've been out there, it's grazing lands. We have our cattle out there, and that's about it. There are no crops. So we're not following agriculture, and that's, I think, a key element to this water source as well. It's not a buy and dry project. Green line, right now, we have done some routing to get to some termination points that Meagan and her team have pointed out that might work. We have talked to landowners. We have an idea of what that looks like. The good news is that green line is a little over 8 miles plus. Depends on how far down we would want to have to come to the termination for you guys. Lee, at one point we thought it might have to have a booster to get it, but we don't have to have that now. So the engineering team took a hard look at that. But that's roughly about 8 miles. If we dive into where your treatment plants are now, it would extend it probably another 2 to 3 miles, something like that. But it's a pretty straightforward shot for off of our particular 90 where we go south there. Okay, let's just talk about the ULA quickly. Unaffected by drought and hydrological variability. Again, this is roughly starts about 150 feet down and goes all the way another 600 feet. So total depth to our wells will be about 800 feet, some a little deeper up on Lazy D, just because it's the higher elevation. The consistent water quality, as I said earlier, it's an ancient water quality. It is very, very good water. The one element is the uranium, but it measured out in our full test. And let me say this, we have done thousands of tests. We've done our pilot treatment test. We essentially followed very much what Greeley did with Terry Basin Ranch. So it's the same team. It's the LRE team. Spheros is formerly LRE. So we followed the same path, didn't try to reinvent that wheel. We just completed that. And as I told Meagan, those reports we'll be glad to share with you guys. Full piloting of the WRT technology, plus lots and lots of lab results from all our wells. And I'll talk about our wells that we drilled here in a minute. So very good water. Again, conjunctive use, I've said enough on that. It does allow incredible flexibility and reliability and firming. As I said, the water is bankable, so it is stored until needed. We've talked about the extent of reuse and recharge, and again, fully consumable water supplies. This is a consistent theme. The graphic in the top, I guess, are you guys top right that you're looking at? That is and this is in from our engineering and hydrology report we filed with the state about 45 days ago. that shows you the size and magnitude of the Upper Laramie Aquifer. And you can kind of see where it goes into Wyoming. It trails off. So when you get the further west you come, it trails off and starts to dip up. So it's just that blue line on what would be the west side is kind of where you don't want to go back. And really, if you see that little black section there, I wish I had my pointer, that's our most southern ranch and section there. So one of the key elements was we stay within the blue zone. The two graphs on the bottom, again, that are covered by the recording here. I think also it's important to let you guys know that you're not pioneering this project. You're not alone in this idea. Fort Collins Love and Water District, I've worked with them for 4.5 years. We did all the modeling for them. Those are graphics that don't mean anything to you guys, but it's something that we can do for you. What does it look like when how it fits in your portfolio? And I think some of the work's been done already. So maybe most of it's there, but that is something that I think I would encourage you guys to remember and keep, and we can provide that for you, is let's model it out. Project design highlights. Some of this I've already talked about. The average total depth around 800 feet. We'll manage them in the 400 GPM range. We've got a really good hydrology team. Fort Collins Love and Water District brought on Tom Sayer, if you guys know him. He's pretty well respected and well known. We're glad to have Tom on the team. So that's all part of the well design group. We're really happy to have him. As I said earlier, the wells are being designed bidirectional and designed with ASR. So one of the things in a classic groundwater well is you can use silicon sand to pack around the filters that suck the water in, or you can use glass beads. Glass beads are specifically designed for ASR. So it's friendly to reverse the pumps and push the water back into the system. So we're going to be doing the glass beads, which are more expensive, but that's kind of what that means about the wells being designed for ASR in the future. The main trunk line, the blue line I mentioned, is 24 MGD. Again, it's gravity fed. The good news, Lee, at least the latest to Wellington, is that can also be gravity fed. So, and we'll have the pumps pushing, but it'll be gravity fed. Right now, when looking at the current numbers that was requested of 1,200 acre feet a year at 270 days, that's a key couple of data points. We size the Wellington line at 12-inch. We think that's the size that will get you there. It will be, at least today, everything we're doing is HDPE. We're a huge fan of that pipe product, and John can speak to that for any questions there. The water treatment plant, we're doing that in phases as well. The first phase is the 6 MGD, as I said earlier, and the contract was awarded to Maltz here just recently. Primary treatment is the ion exchange for the uranium removal. Again, it's just barely above the MCL, so this is really good water. So one of the things I like to point out, WRT has about 700 systems across the United States. They treat 1.7 billion gallons a day with this technology. So this is off the shelf, very well established technology, pretty straightforward stuff. Construction status on the pipeline, we're already at 95%. We broke the pipeline in the blue line, and again, speaking to that project, is in 3 segments. Segment 1 is designed. Segment 2 is roughly 65%, and then segment 3 is right in that same vein. But segment 1 is done, and we're broken, I guess 6 miles is segment 1. Is that about right? Pipeline construction started. Thanks for those who came to the groundbreaking. Appreciate that. And then we're going into 65% design completion for the water treatment plant, which we hope to have here in a couple of months if our construction managers Quit changing y'all's mind. We have good debates with our team. One of the things that we have a rule was, look out for the blind spots. And by the way, check your ego at the door. So our team is really good at that, and I'm pretty proud of that for them. So that's it. I want to emphasize, I have lots and lots of technical data and good reports, and I have some other slides that we can share that as part of the backup, but Meagan said I had 15 to 20 minutes, so I tried to keep it as short as I could. So we're open for questions, and certainly can go back to any other things that you guys might have.
All right, I'll get it started.
Oh, okay, good.
What would you suspect would be a timeline that Wellington would work within? I know you're working through Fort Collins right now. What do you think is possible?
So us acquiring the Lazy D being fully decreed water, there's two things that affect the time now, because it's either do you have decreed water ready to go, which we do. It's easements and permitting. All the permitting, in my opinion, the hard permitting is the water treatment plant. We're going through a USR process there in Weld County, the CDPHE permit process. That's a long process, but that's being done today. So when Wellington is ready, we're delivering in Q1 of 29, to answer your question, Mayor.
Okay.
So we're going to be ready to go in Q1 of 29. The question is that when the town needs it? What does the financing look like? How do we structure that timing? But for us, it's really about the easements and the pipeline to get it there. And they've already done a bunch of miles in just 45 days. And we're talking about 8 miles to you guys. So it's one of the things, I know we have some landowners here. One of the things that we try to do as a group is also make sure we, on the easements, we pay fair price. We don't haggle. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure, and that helps a lot in timing for easements. So I think, Mayor, it's easements and permitting, of which we're doing the permitting right now. So it'd be really the easements to get to where you guys are needing it. And when do you need the water? That's the other big question. But if the easements and permit if the easements were in place, we could have that 8 miles done in I want to overstep this, but probably 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that a fair?
Say, yeah, the construction, the water and the infrastructure wouldn't be our limiting factor
Okay.
Yeah.
on timeline. It would be
Yeah.
our.
You notice he didn't jump out of his seat when I said
Yeah.
18
Yeah.
months. So.
He's
18
being
months.
cool.
Your challenges are some of the permits, crossing I-25.
Correct.
With CDOT, going from Weld to Larimer County
Okay.
causes some just timeline issues of going for that. And if Larimer County has any 1041 pieces to that, I would tell you those are the three that would be the longest lead from our perspective, from a build out.
And the way it works, and again, this is 12-inch, so I'm not sure how that would work, but in Weld County, if a pipeline starts in their county and crosses to another county, it requires a USR.
Okay.
And that's a permit process.
When they say USR, it's similar to Larimer County's 1041.
Yeah, it's a
process.
10.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 1040.
All right.
It's their 1041 is what it is.
All right. So that's good to know. I think
Yeah.
their timeline is well within not the limiting factor then in that case. Any other questions from the group? Let's start with Blackwell.
Yeah.
So.
Biggest. I guess my biggest concerns are just the general cost of the water, and my guess is that it being private, that those kind of costs can change. Specifically, what I would just be curious, and this is, I guess, more geared towards staff and your all's conversation, because I trust you all to lead that.
Sure.
But I would be curious as far as like the treatment that you have. And it was an ion. How did you?
Ion exchange.
Ion exchange. Is that specifically because of the uranium in that water that or is it just the best technology right now, or?
That's correct. It is what I call the only constituent that we have to treat for, other than disinfection for conveyance. That's how clean the water is. And I'll just add one other thing, is that the district is looking at our water from a TDS level as well.
Mhm.
They have really low TDS, which can be corrosive to their system. We're averaging around 240 TDS. But they're excited to see what that does to minimize their corrosion in their system because it'll raise their TDS.
I guess my concern would be as the water tables drop, since it is kind of a closed system, is there concern about those levels, right? Those grading levels being higher since you basically have less water in that table, and then that having an impact on that treatment. And then again, my concern is that because there's now needed treatment, that would increase costs. And I guess again, this is more for later conversations
Sure.
about that cost increase. I don't know if it's much of a question, but that's just my concern.
I see where you're going. And one of the things that part of the well design that is important when we did and I think whoever was out the groundbreaking may have seen it, but one of the things when we drilled our test wells and our first production well, we took core samples every 10 feet.
Cool.
And part of that, literally from 0-10, I was saying this earlier, all the way to 8-10. So
Mhm.
every 10 feet. And it's really cool stuff. But we now know where that uranium is.
Cool.
And so what we're doing is designing the wells and the screen. So it's not like a solid pipe and then 200 feet of screen. It's solid pipe, screen where they see the blips on the measurements, the nuclear measurements they do.
Mhm. Your gamma.
And then we don't put the screens where we try to stay away from that uranium zones,
Sure.
which is pretty shallow, by the way. A lot of that uranium zones is shallow. So we kind of know where that is. And what our team is doing is saying, look, we can design where we're drawing, because you do ultimately get a cone of depression, I think is what you're talking about. Ultimately, you get a cone of depression. Does that create more uranium? And where we're creating is we're staying away from those zones. We're
Okay.
not putting screens to suck water from where those zones are. Doesn't mean it won't be there. We're building it to make sure we have coverage, but it is a great question. And I think we can provide some
Cool.
data points behind that.
Sure. As somebody that lives in that world, and I look at gamma logs just about every day.
God bless you.
And boy, do I wish that
Yes.
land was uniform
Yeah.
over any amount of space.
It's not.
I'm glad you get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are again my concern really is the cost and going up, and that's in my head that was just something that could be one of those just concerns. Again, this may be 40 years out, 50 years out, and that's kind of my second question is there's that 100-year kind of promise, I guess. What is the life of this table that you guys are looking at? Because it is kind of one and done, unless you're pushing that water back in. I'm just
Correct. There's no doubt we have to be good stewards of the water resource. It is by regulation, by law here in Colorado. It's regulated at 100 years. Unlike some of the things that happened down south, where too many straws got put in the ground, and there was no regulation to manage that. So the reason I brought up the 31,000 surface acres, we are the largest non-tributary groundwater position in Colorado.
Cool.
And so that is a key element to managing that resource, where you're decreed by how much you can take. You can't take any more per surface acre. It's just, you can't do it. And so I think, again, the management plan of recharging as well as extending and managing. I'll say this again, from Wellington's perspective, maybe a little bit different. And that's why I emphasize the reuse component for you guys. You guys are set up really well for a reuse program. So you may be using this more of a base load type source, which is fine, but you also have the ability to leverage your reuse program, and that'll offset where you have to go back for storage or what have you. But Trustee Aaron, I'm telling you, it is an absolute good question that we have to be good stewards. You have to manage. I mean, the city of Greeley, just so you guys know, we talk to their team constantly. We're both, between them and us, we're the largest position holders there. And we recognize how important that is.
And honestly, that second question was more for me while I got you guys here. Like I said, from a town perspective, I think.
Well, I apologize. Our hydrology team, the lead guy's getting married this weekend, and the other guy's down in a court case down south. So love to have you talk to him.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff.
Yeah, And I would also, we'll provide it to Meagan. The report we filed with the state for our ranch is public. So encourage you to read that. We'll give it to you. It's 500 pages, so.
That's his favorite.
Yeah, you will.
He's gonna love that.
Yes, you'll love it.
And Brent, on that report,
Yeah.
that is for the report you filed for the decrees for the additional
For our ranch.
4,300.
Correct.
Okay.
So we initially, I'll tell you, Trustee Aaron, on this one, we initially applied for our ranch, that position for 4,300 acre feet a year. That was what we thought was there. When we did all the work and science, our guys backed off of that. We went down to 4,000. So it's 4,000 plus Lazy D at 19,466. That's the collective water rights. But that 4,000 is the report that you will see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep, I said, I think just as far as the town's concerned, the raising costs, I think, is something that should just be, on the hackles or whatnot. So that's why I wanted to bring that up specifically for the board. And then my curiosity, because I got people here that are working in geology.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I have.
Totally agree. And I'll one more point on that is that I can't say enough, you're not alone on this project.
Yeah.
So trust me, I got the board at Fort Collins 11 Water District every month. So we get it. And the operating agreement is also public. So be glad to share that. You can see what we've come up with our starting fixed price OpEx for the first 5 years. And then we go forward together after that. Our thought is that again, the more that participate, then we can share in those OpEx numbers.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Trustee Moyer.
Yes, so a few things here. I think when we're talking about cost, it's important to look at the possibilities of how we would fund this endeavor. And there was a question raised last week about whether or not we could use fees in lieu that went to the enterprise fund to purchase other water products to diversify our portfolio.
I'm going to say that's an internal question too. So,
Well, but I already selected it and I already sent it internally, but I think it's important for people to know that there are funds available for us to do this that are not that we could access. And Meagan, if you want to expand on that, I would love it.
I mean, and I think what Trustee Moyer is referencing is that last week we brought forward some municipal ordinance change that altered how we develop and apply our cash in lieu, not how we apply it, but the formula for how we develop our cash in lieu. That is benchmarked on some local market transactions tied to North Peter Irrigation Company, but that also captures the flexibility of having, there's other language in that ordinance, but it doesn't specify that money can only be used to buy North Peter. Now, this is, the prospect of VITA is one piece of a diverse portfolio of which North Peter and continuing to acquire those shares is also an important piece. And if and when we're ready to move forward with this project, there'll be a lot of financial analysis that Director David is really excited about. And we would be coming back to look at additional or new pricing structures, of course, for cash in lieu at that point. But yes, I would say that yes, the funds that we currently have in our raw water reserve fund that are pegged for raw water supply sources could be utilized for other projects.
Yeah, thank you, Meagan. I just don't want people to hear cost and raise of cost and associate that with their water bills. I think that we have avenues within our municipality and our funds, the enterprise fund, the water enterprise fund, to support diversification of our water portfolio. So I just wanted to make that really clear so people didn't get concerned. You mentioned that the possibility of us turning over and reusing and resurfacing our water could lead to 400 years of use over the 100. Is that what you said?
In our Fort Collins 11 water modeling, that's what it showed. Because again, they didn't have this type of water in their portfolio. I think with Wellington, it's very possible to do that properly. Yes, I think you can, and
And I'll say that as part of the water source development planning effort, that was, I think what was quoted in there is that we could for sure extend it to a 300-year. And each off-taker would have just like this, the story of every municipality or water district's portfolio is very different. It's made up of different sources of water that they can use in different ways. And that would be true for this water, depending on location. We are in a great spot to be able to utilize to essentially reuse this water by creating an additional augmentation plan would be the simplest, most direct and quickest way that we could start reusing supplies. And what that would look like is we are accounting for it at our wastewater treatment plant, right? And we're saying we're putting new water into the Boxelder Creek that didn't used to be there. And because of that, we could go drill another well similar to the Wilson wells, but we would have our own augmentation plan for it. And then we could create, produce more potable water that way. There is long-term reuse capacities. You could do direct potable reuse. We're a long way from that just because the volume that we would use would be pretty low. There's also the opportunity to sell that water to a downstream person who might need it.
that's what I was going to say. You guys are at the north end.
North end, right?
Yeah.
So there's opportunities to create some, some revenue situation with it. It's like liquid gold.
Mhm.
I would also talk about any type of new greenfield type projects, any kind of new school, park, hospital, anything that requires landscaping or, for irrigation purposes. This is where that water should go first,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because you can the second use, not the first use, maybe even the third use,
Right.
maybe even the fourth use. Just keep that in mind for and that to me, you could use for encouragement for bringing you development here.
Yep. Thank you. I think that's really important. And especially when we're looking at maybe some termed agreements with other sources, the fact to have that long-term, extremely long vision, and use is really important. And I love that you connect it to new development because that is one of our focuses, in economic development. So that works perfectly. And then the last comment I have is just any of those lab results, things that you mentioned that you have those reports for us to see. I think a lot of us are data nerds and we would love to see all that information. So anything you can share with us would be amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely. It'll have to come in a link because it's.
That's fine. We know how to follow those.
Trustee Cannon.
I don't have any questions for you. I've been involved off and on for 9 years we're trying to get alternative sources of water to Wellington. And of all the avenues that I've pursued, which is, 9 or 10 or 11 different avenues over the years, this is the most promising. And it's the most direct. I love the fact that I always thought that we could gravity feed that to Wellington. And I'm glad the engineering team, you don't want to run a pump station for that kind of stuff. The idea of using this water to exhaustion is very intriguing, and I think it's something that this board and our staff really needs to delve deep into about how we can maximize that. Brent, you and your team, thank you so much for doing this and for coming here tonight and sharing this with us. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate having us here, and we recognize it's a process. So you talked about time, Mayor. We've been working on it for 5 years, so it's good timing for you guys.
Yeah, good talking to you. Trustee Barrett.
Yeah.
Well, I've already covered a lot of the questions I had. You covered the uranium, the timeline, the uranium one's actually pretty interesting to me, actually, just finding out how it settles and everything, because from what I understand, when we're making these new reservoirs nearby, a concern they have is uranium, but when they fill it with water, it actually dilutes it. And this is the opposite concern, right? And you've already had the foresight for it, and I really appreciate that because that's always going to be an area of concern. And the cost, I am hoping that in the long run, this is going to be the most cost-effective option for us. So, yeah, I look forward to all the links you send us, and that's really awesome. Thank you.
Bet.
Mayor Tim Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Waller, just want to say big thanks to your team for coming and showing us this presentation tonight. Excellent information. I fortunately was lucky enough to sit on the Water Source Development Plan Advisory Board when we talked about this along with our friends at Westwater Research. So obviously, future planning has been very much a core component for us, and we've evaluated many different sources at that time. So I just want to say thank you to you guys. I was very happy to, along with staff and the former mayor and our community stakeholders, to be able to recommend the VITA project to this board. So I just want to say thank you for all this information, and look forward to working with the rest of the team to get this going. So.
We put a lot of effort and resources really into determining what our next steps should be for water source development. And they've all pointed towards you guys as the top potential solution, both financially and with the future in mind. Right now, we're in a situation where we are trying to understand and resolve water issues just from, in our minds, it's always been like, oh my God, 40 years ago. You know what I mean? So 43, because I'm 43. So it's 40, same year as I was born. So we're trying to solve the problem from when I was born. But to think that we could potentially be kicking off a project that looks towards 300, 400 years of probably the single most intimidating challenge of the future of all of Colorado and beyond. If we're looking for a solution that we're talking about solving or contributing towards and planning for centuries into the future, is a big deal. And I'm really proud of us for considering this. I think it's an amazing project. We've already been, like I said, headed this direction, and we've been recommended to pursue this option. So among our other water source development. So I think it's really great to learn more about the project. I am still really confused about water going both ways. So that's something I need to see a diagram or something to understand that, to be completely
Back
honest.
for ASR, you mean?
Yes.
It's power and pumping. It's pushing it
And
back.
glass beads.
Yeah, and yes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Wellington's probably a long way.
Yeah, right.
We would, if we were to move forward with this, there would be the availability of ASR, so storage bucket available to the town. If at some point in our future we acquire sources that could be treated and put back in.
Great.
Currently, our other sources
Mhm.
don't qualify for that.
Right.
But that's not to say that we wouldn't or couldn't.
Future opportunities. I mean, we've just went through our biggest construction projects of all time with our water treatment, wastewater. So if anything too, we could kind of reroute the future for our plans of continuously expanding or, go a different direction that's more sustainable or diverse is I think the goal. So a lot of questions still out there, exactly how we deploy it and what that looks like. But I'm really excited about everything that you presented and our potential for future.
And I will
together.
make this point, and Meagan knows this, that we do get calls all the time from developers looking for areas here that, and what's the number one thing they ask is, do they have the water?
Yeah.
For obvious reasons. So
Right.
I think, again, the town, if it wants to, can leverage the project and the water source for future development. There's developers out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Are there any other final thoughts or questions?
I just wanted to say that this is, I really wanted the opportunity to have Brent and his team come up so you could put some names to some faces for those that hadn't, weren't able to make. Trustee Cannon was able to make it out to the groundbreaking, but I wanted other folks to meet these gentlemen. This is a really big regional project for Northern Colorado that I think would be exciting for Wellington to be able to participate, especially in the early stages of it, and to be able to help develop this regionally, because it is a regional. Not every project gets to be regional. It needs to be, because water doesn't stick to municipal boundaries, district boundaries, whatever else. And this is a really great opportunity for Northern Colorado. So I'm excited to have them here. I'm excited that you're excited about learning more. We would definitely come back. Again, this is not any kind of action item. We would come back as we have additional, more detailed information around moving forward with an agreement around cost structures, around offtake structure, as we move forward. But I wanted to make sure you could put some faces to names when I speak of these gentlemen and, yeah, have the opportunity to shake their hands. So, appreciate you all coming up.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Yes.
We stand behind our very, very talented staff. So you guys are in good hands
Thank
and
you.
we
Oh, yeah.
can't wait to hear more about
Love it.
your conversation.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Great.
Will say, because I always do this, I don't think I brought enough, so I'll make sure Meagan gets more, but we are sock guys, so you.
Oh,
can-
they're not.
I was like, what is coming out of that
I don't have
box?
socks.
Is that too expensive?
This is the actual
You're
one.
fine.
You guys can, I'll get you more bottles, so I don't know if I have enough.
Trustee Cannon should already have one. I already have one.
Thank you. That's fun.
I'm drinking, but you know.
Oh, I was about to.
It's better for display. so-
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I will.
Socks and water. Good mix. Thanks, everybody. I'll give a moment for everyone to get situated.
I saw you walking. I didn't even know you were.
Okay, we're on to our item number 2, which is our water distribution master plan presented by Nathan Ewert, Deputy Public Works Director. Hello, Nate. Let's just drink it right now. Look at so trusting.
Here to make him look taller.
On your computer.
I traded them in for an activity. I'm just kidding. It's no chore chart. It's like a chore chart.
All right, good evening, Board of Trustees. I'm Nathan Ewert, Deputy Director of Public Works. Was also the project manager for the distribution system master plan. I'll start with a brief background on this project. That is my hot dog pen. Here we go. I had a hot dog pen today from Jenny.
It looks like
That's actually from Thistle.
It
From Thistle via.
it was. She told me that. She had 2 of them, so
I also have one.
I told her I'd bring it tonight. This project started in 2025 as a capital project in the water fund. Project was posted to BidNet on January 14th of 2025 and 8 proposals.
That's right.
That was the right slide.
Yeah.
Okay, and 8 proposals were received and subsequently interviews were held with the top 3 scoring firms, and AE2S was selected as the preferred consultant. On March 26, 2025, the town board approved the contract with AE2S for $123,888. Tonight, we do have Emily McKenzie with us. She's joining us from the Denver office. Pretty sure she's here just to make sure I don't screw this up. But welcome, Emily, to Wellington. It's not your first time. This is one of the last remaining items in the project scope. Following this presentation tonight, we'll take any feedback we receive from the board and we'll finalize the master plan, and then we'll bring that back to the full board at some point in the future for official adoption, as is the standard practice now with master plans. Let's start with the most basic question that you all may have of what is the distribution system? The distribution system in Wellington actually starts at the outlet to our 1 million gallon and our 2 million gallon storage tanks located at the water treatment plant. Some municipalities, mostly larger ones, have their tanks included in the distribution system, but since ours are used for contact time to achieve disinfection, by definition, they are part of the treatment process and are not part of the distribution system. From the storage tanks, water is conveyed by gravity through two transmission mains, an original 16-inch asbestos cement pipe, and a newer 18-inch PVC main. The hydraulic grade and pressure within the system is controlled exclusively by the elevation in the storage tanks, with the exception of the Buffalo Creek subdivision, and we'll talk about that in subsequent slides. Within the distribution system, there are 3 pressure zones that control and set the pressure at each distribution point. As elevation decreases on the ground, typically moving south from the treatment plant, the hydraulic grade line stays the same, thereby increasing the pressure within the distribution system. Our design standard for distribution system has water delivered at a pressure between 50 and 80 psi, which is that sweet spot that appliances like washing machines, dishwashers, etc. When pressures exceed that 80 psi point, it's necessary to reduce the pressure through a zone break with a pressure reducing valve that then resets the pressure to that 60 to 70, 80 ps or 60 to 70 psi mark downstream of the valve. So the 3 pressure zones that we have in our system are defined as the Buffalo Creek system, which is just a closed pumped system. There is the main zone, which is from the treatment plant down to Ronald Reagan at a hydraulic grade line of about 5,360 feet. And then there is the south zone, which is from Ronald Reagan down to proposed development down on CR 58, which would have a hydraulic grade line of about 5,330 feet. Within the distribution zone, there is a large network of pipes with varying diameters. In our system, we operate roughly 71 miles of pipe, ranging in size from 4-inch to 16-inch. The larger diameter pipes are typically considered transmission mains. So as you see in that exhibit, there are blue lines kind of cutting from west to east across and under I-25. Those are 16-inch mains that are supplying the east side of the town. They're technically in our distribution system, but I call them transmission mains. There's not a lot of services off of them. One of the great things about our system is it's mostly made up of 8-inch or larger PVC pipe. Smaller diameter pipe, 8 inches and less, is typically the older pipe. That's where we see a lot of our asbestos cement pipe, specifically within Old Town. All the new developments have PVC pipe, which is great. That's the industry standard. The AC pipe is what we'd be looking to phase out over time. So now, before I get into the project scope, I want to touch briefly on what a distribution master plan is supposed to be. It is a long-term planning document that provides an assessment of the existing distribution system in terms of existing capacity, operational efficiency, as well as looks towards future growth scenarios and identifies potential operational and hydraulic deficiencies, and lastly, develops capital improvement projects to support long-term growth and remedy those identified deficiencies. That being said, the scope of this project had 3 main tasks. We had a water model update and calibration, and then we had water system planning, which consisted of several tasks that I'll discuss in the coming slides. And lastly, we had the master plan report. Starting with the water model update and calibration, the original water model was prepared back in 2020 using existing GIS data sets and limited water meter data, customer information, consumption data. The model update effort upgraded the software to the current modeling standard and revised and updated the demand allocations within the model based on customer usage data and plant production data. New diurnal curves were developed based on the usage data. Diurnal curves, which you'll see here on the slide, show the usage of water throughout a 24-hour period. The idea behind them is that usage is not constant, but that people and systems use water in a very predictable pattern that can be applied within the model to vary demands throughout the day. It is typical to have multiple diurnal curves within your model based off of the scenario that you're running. In our case, we have diurnal patterns for winter usage and summer usage, as well as average usage. And the key difference there is obviously your irrigation demand in the summer. The model was also updated to include new developments that have occurred between 2020 and 2025, And it also included an update to the hydraulic characteristics of the main treatment plant as well as the nano facility. When the model was originally developed, I didn't have funds to go in detail there, so I said just put a valve and say the production is X. And now we've got pump curves and everything else in there, so it's more realistic. Moving on to calibration. The model is calibrated in a number of ways, but the most basic is to open up a hydrant and run it. Put a flow meter on it, measure pressures throughout the system, and we take those numbers back, send it back to the consultant, and then they compare it to the model results for the same hydrant flow. And you hope that they're very similar. If not, you adjust the model. Once calibrated, the model scenarios are then built, which in this project that included a maximum day, which would be sometime in the summer, minimum day, which is typically winter usage, average day, which I call shoulder season, that's spring, fall usage. And then we have our two future growth scenarios of 2030, which at the time was intended to be a 5-year scenario. Now it's more like a 4-year scenario, and 2045, which is a 20-year scenario. The water system planning task, this started with an existing conditions analysis. In this task, the consultant looked at key information for the distribution system. They looked at pipe age, break history, and pipe material. We always knock on wood when we say break history because we don't really have a lot of break history.
Knock on real wood. Sorry, find real wood.
Through the various model outputs, the consultant is able to review the hydraulic performance of the system, looking at key indicators, primarily velocity. Velocity is an indicator of excessive head loss within a system. You want lower velocity, larger pipe, lower velocity, less head loss. So the lower your velocity, the better performance. You typically look to have 10 feet per second or less. Otherwise, you need to upsize your pipes. They also looked at fire flow availability and water age. Included with this planning task was the development of the future conditions growth scenarios that were created in the model. And we'll go into details on the coming slides of how those scenarios were developed. They also completed a risk assessment. This was probably one of the more easier tasks. With a relatively new system, minimal break history, there isn't anything major that was found as far as risk assessment other than the older AC pipe throughout Old Town. As part of this task, they came up with an implementation plan. These would be the identified projects to accommodate future growth and address issues within the existing system. And then lastly, there's the master plan report, which will be finalized after this presentation. So let's talk model results. Okay. Starting with the existing conditions analysis, the good news here is there aren't really any major deficiencies identified other than the older, smaller diameter asbestos cement pipe within Old Town. There are 2 minor deficiencies, which I'll talk briefly about with the Buffalo Creek pump station, and then a pressure zone issue down in Sage Meadows. So the Buffalo Creek booster station, I don't know if you're aware, it's up there kind of north of Wellington Community Park. You wouldn't recognize it. It's just kind of in a small building that's fenced off. As mentioned previously, it provides boosted pressure to only Buffalo Creek subdivision, which is separated by valves from the rest of the distribution system. The pump station is what I would consider a dumb station. There's no control logic. There's no motor speed controls. It's either on or off, and it's controlled daily by C&D staff with manual switching of the duty and standby pumps. There is no SCADA remote control or visibility on this station, so we rely on manual operation and daily interaction to keep it functioning. The operation of this pump station isn't ideal, but if and when growth occurs to the north, whatever that may be, new pressure zones would be developed, and the intent would be to phase out this pump station. Now, jumping down to the south zone pressure issues at Sage Meadows. I'll characterize this as inconsistent valving has created an issue where the main zone bleeds across to the south zone through Sage Meadows. This is currently controlled by valving, but by valving it off, this eliminates an additional loop within our system, which isn't ideal. To address this issue, there is a proposed project that we're working on costing out right now as part of the upcoming 2027 5-year CIP proposal. This wasn't included in further CIP discussion. It's a relatively small project, and the goal here was to kind of focus on the larger items. Now moving on to the, sorry about that, there's a slide behind.
You're good.
The future growth scenarios. These growth scenarios are referred to by the year 2030 and 2045. Were developed using future land use maps in conjunction with the demand projections developed in the 2024 West Water Demand Analysis. Land use classifications were mapped, future land use classifications were mapped to a water use classification, and the demands were applied within the model using the best estimated location of that growth. For the 2030 scenario, we assumed growth area number 1 would be the most likely to occur within the next 5 years. So 2030 looks at areas for growth much closer to town limits, with 2045 looking at growth further north between current town limits and Owl Canyon. So that would be growth areas 2 through 4. In addition to the future growth scenario, we included an analysis of the potential to accommodate an alternative water supply, the VITA project, which you just heard. There you go. Thank you, Meagan. Entering the town from the north, the analysis included consideration of the infrastructure needs to fully utilize and integrate this alternative source within the distribution system. Infrastructure considerations included interim conditions where water is sent directly to the existing storage tanks at the treatment plant, then to a future 1 million gallon ground storage tank. It also included items such as chlorine boosters and various PRV stations needed to create the new pressure zones through the north of the GMA. Moving on to project recommendations. The 2030 scenario doesn't have a slide. I'm intentionally not discussing these in detail because, as previously stated, the existing distribution system doesn't have many issues. There's the South Zone PRV issue that I mentioned, and then there is the need to plan for the aging asbestos cement pipe. But the great thing about AC pipe is if you keep using it and you keep it wet and you don't bother it, it usually stays, it behaves itself. It doesn't break. We don't have a big break history here. But the plan should be to budget for the replacement each year, just some percentage, so you don't fall behind. The work, in theory, should coordinate with other utility and infrastructure work to share the cost of road repair between the projects and the various funds. Typically with utility work, you see your biggest expense coming from putting the road back together, which is interesting. Project recommendations for the 2045 scenario. These projects were developed to meet the needs of growth while also being able to function with or without the VITA project. 2 new pressure zones are needed at hydraulic grade of 5410 and 5525. To serve these higher pressure zones, the master plan recommends a new pump station at the water treatment plant. This would create a pump zone similar to the way that Buffalo Creek operates now, but with pumps sized for peak demand and fire flow. And this would be more than just residential. This would be commercial and industrial peak fire flow. So this would be a much larger pump station. With VITA, a new 1 million gallon ground storage tank is needed somewhere at the elevation of 5,550. This would also serve to replace the existing 1 million gallon tank, which as of its last inspection in about 2023 was identified as having structural issues that may limit its functionality past 2035. The pump station is still needed if VITA does happen. The current scenario with VITA is that they would operate 300 days a year with 60 days off for maintenance. During that 60-day timeline, we would rely on the pump station to serve the northern pressure zones and operate as it would without VITA. All of that leads us into our recommended capital projects. In near term, in 5 to 10 years, budgeting for the yearly replacement of the older asbestos cement transmission main and the distribution pipes. There is a need for the new PRV down in the Sage Meadows area. And I hadn't mentioned this before, but it is in the master plan. There is a project shown as additional looping of distribution lines under the train tracks south of the proposed Sage Farms project. This is envisioned as a development-driven project. It's not something that is necessary. It's nice to have if development occurs on both sides of those tracks. We'll want that. There is a future sanitary sewer outfall that is being looked at currently going under the tracks, and I would envision that if you're going under the tracks once, you do one permitted project and you get both of those pipelines permitted at the same time. Like I said, that's really a kind of a development-driven project, so it's not something that I spoke a lot about. In long-term growth, what we're looking at is the Northern Growth Area Booster Pump Station. We would also envision decommissioning then the Buffalo Creek Booster Pump Station. There are the various VITA transmission mains, which you can see on that drawing there to your right. There's the Northern Pressure Zone PRV stations, and there's the continued budgeting for replacement of the asbestos transmission main and the distribution pipes. There's also the decommissioning of the 1 million gallon storage tank, as well as a new 1 million gallon ground storage tank somewhere along the VITA pipeline. In the remaining slide, I've listed the near-term projects, and then I've also listed a table showing the planning dollars that have been put together for several of these projects. There is a cost inflated column as well. There are some big numbers in this table. It's just here to demonstrate that we do have a lot of infrastructure needs as the town grows. And all of these items should be considered as Meagan works through her future rate analysis. With that being said, I'll stand for any questions or comments.
I'm so very happy that we are doing a working session on both of these items at the same session because it kind of puts a whole picture together. So I appreciate that. The first thing I want to say is the word asbestos always makes me a little nervous, but I'm glad to hear that that's not necessarily a risk. But planning to replace that sounds great. I live downtown. My water seems fine. And then I guess the other thing is it is constantly in the news all summer long. I follow all kinds of different towns and cities around Colorado and beyond. And it is like water main break after water main break after water main break. And so I'm just curious, obviously that hasn't been the case now, but what happens when that occurs? Like what is the response and how does our master planning help with the risks associated with it or recovery?
Thank you for the question. I guess, I think the closest thing that we've had to a water main break since I've been here was when Comcast bored through a water line down at Roosevelt and 5th Street. What happens is it comes out of the ground. You lose pressure within your distribution system, and it's really on to the street team or collections and distribution team or the on-call operator to get out there and isolate it on the valves as quickly as possible. What you don't want to do is ever drop below 20 PSI in your system, because then you're at risk of introducing, things can come into the pipes. That's rare that that occurs, just because as long as your tanks are full, you're just going to keep pushing water out. You're never going to be having water come in. But it is critical to get it isolated as quickly as possible. And then it's usually, as far as the emergency response, it's a function of identifying if there are customers out of water. With the Roosevelt project, I think we had maybe 2 customers out of water, and we went and grabbed cases of water and made sure it was okay if we left it off until the morning, and then we could bring a full crew in and get to work on it.
Okay.
Typically working at night is not something we'd like to do, but obviously if there's a bunch of people out, it's something that we'll push and we'll get done. We did that with the sewer break at the same time. I mean, that's sort of our response time, but yeah, the critical things are just don't let your pressure in the system drop below 20 psi.
Okay.
And we're not really at risk of doing that because our tanks are always 40+ feet. So there's plenty of water to come out.
Okay, that's great
Yeah.
news to hear. We'll start from the right, my right, Trustee Cannon. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Trustee Barrett. Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Ewert, the only question I think I've got for you is it just obviously when it comes to the 10 to 20-year planning horizon and the decommissioning of the 1 million gallon tank and the addition of a new 1 million gallon tank, obviously that's going to be very much dependent on whether VITA comes to fruition. I'm just trying to understand as far as, for future boards or these types of things, I guess I would not want to run into a scenario where we think that at some, maybe VITA doesn't happen and we've already started planning for a new tank or vice versa. Do you have concerns about that? I'm just trying to understand, I'm presuming there's a drop dead date at some point, and I just want to be aware. Well, it may not be any of us, but somebody's going to have to be aware of it at some point.
Thank you for the question. The good news is the distribution system can operate just fine with 2 million gallons of storage. We have a treatment plant that can ramp up and produce at 4 MGD, and with 2 million gallons of storage plus that additional treatment capacity, it's not an issue. There's plenty of storage there. There are various CDPHE requirements as far as the amount of storage that you have to have in your distribution system. For instance, you've got to have your fire flow, which is a 2-hour duration at 1500 GPM. That's roughly 4 feet of our 46-foot tank. That's our fire demand. The rest of it is really equalization storage to maintain your 20 PSI minimum. And then everything above that sets the pressures within the distribution system in town. So if something happened to the 1 million gallon tank and we had to take it offline and we didn't have another tank ready to go, that's not an issue. That's not a concern with the project team. I had that conversation many times with Emily and Trevor, the other consultant working on the project. It's really more the storage tank further in the north is so that we don't have to pump to serve that northern growth area. It's always better to gravity feed as much as possible and not rely on pump stations. You've got electrical costs. If your pumps go down, that's a whole nother issue, right? You'd much rather get it to the tank and then distribute through your system through gravity. Ideally, the 10-year timeline is what we were looking at when we saw the condition of that 1 million gallon tank interior. It was recoated.
Right.
We did do some structural fixes to it. 10 years is probably a short timeline. I think it can go further, but 10 years, we want to start planning for a new tank.
Wonderful. Appreciate the answer.
Yeah.
Trustee Moyer.
So, just a couple questions, maybe comments. I'm not sure which they're going to qualify as. So you mentioned a new pump station with the Sage Meadows. Or I think maybe when we talked about the next phase of Sage Meadows, there was a pump station involved. I'm curious, and this may be a answer me tomorrow or next week kind of question. But like, if that pump station was going to be replacing, any of the ones that you've talked about that might need upgrading, or if it's standalone for that phase of that development. I only thought of this because of something you said, so I apologize.
So I don't know if I misspoke, but I think down at Sage Meadows, it was a PRV, a pressure reducing valve station. There's just some odd configuration where the main zone bleeds across to the south zone. So Sage Meadows is getting higher pressures than it should if that PRV was fully functional. The PRV is fully functional, but it's just bleeding across the zone. So we have it valved off, so it's really just the Sage Meadows neighborhood that is getting those higher pressures. What we propose to do is install an additional pressure reducing valve station on the pipeline that doesn't have one, that needs one. And that would fully isolate that zone and restore those zone boundaries. And then we can open up the distribution main along GW Bush, kind of at the train tracks right there.
Okay.
Because right now it's valved off to keep it separate from the other south zones.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that clarification. When you said you brought like bottled water to everybody, I just want to highlight that as something that like Wellington does really well, is take care of each other. And so thank you in that moment of crisis for having that level of care. I know you said you don't like to work at night, but like doing that and being able to provide that to our residents is just something that I think our town is very unique for. And then just as far as our treatment plant, when we talk about expansion, we essentially have a seed project where as our needs grow as a town, we have the room to be able to expand and to grow and to serve more. And I think it's important for our community to understand that we're not talking about another facility. We're talking about being able to expand on what we already have and infrastructure that we've already provided. Can you elaborate on that at all?
Correct. I mean, there's no need for another treatment plant. If VITA comes to fruition, that water is fully treated. We would primarily look to utilize it and do a blending study, see how it interacts with our water, and that would be another function of a tank further up in the system, because then we can just blend it all right there in that tank. Otherwise, we can bring it down to our 2 tanks at the treatment plant currently, blend it there, and then just distribute it to the residents. But the treatment plant can be expanded, but at this point, I don't know that's really a necessity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Moore.
Thank you. I think my only question that I just want to be clear on, this does not hinge or is not contingent upon VITA. Did I understand that right?
Correct. When the distribution master plan had already started, when we really got into the discussions with VITA, not knowing if where they were going to go, I provided direction to the consulting team that we needed to figure out a way to make our future plans work with or without VITA. The pump station would be the critical piece here. We need that pump station to pump up to the northern growth area, but everything that you saw on the charts or on the diagrams that is within our GMA, all that will function as envisioned with or without VITA.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify in my head.
Trustee Blackstone.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just want to say the background information is always appreciated for me, and I assume anyone else watching, but I can speak for myself when I always appreciate the more information. I also wanted to say thank you for when you're putting together this master plan, making sure that we are making use of like our future land use studies and demand analysis. I think that, again, if we're putting the money into those analysis and things, that we're actually using them, I think that is just something I'm happy I'm happy to see. I didn't have any questions. I thought it was great. My take though, or I guess my comment would be, especially when I heard about the pump station over by Buffalo Creek and that it is being manned manually. If you were looking for any sort of guidance, from at least me, that if we can modernize things as much as possible, I am personally, in favor of it. I think there is just the technology out there now to be able to do things automatically. And that's, again, if you were if you were on the fence and we're like, man, if just somebody could just mention that's something would love to see that being, part of that master plan is getting more of that technology, because I think then the residents are going to benefit. Everybody's going to benefit from not having to send somebody out somewhere and do something, and making use of, like I said, the technology that we have now to automatically turn things on when we're expecting water usage to go up, and vice versa. That technology is here now, so we should be using it. So that's just my comment. Just want to let you know that that's where my head.
There's discussions about upgrades to the Buffalo Creek pump station, but those will get sorted out here in the next several weeks as we
Right.
work on the 2027 budget.
Score. And like the future one, if we're going to be building one in the future, I would support that personally. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. I am just so happy that we were able to consider VITA as part of this project, because what a waste it would have been if we went through all this effort and made these plans and then completely turned it upside down with that. So I really appreciate the foresight to do that, not to mention all the very clear growth areas that we have considered or are potential in the future. So I appreciate that so much. When we met with Trustee Blackstone and I met with Bobert's staff, they mentioned that those congressional grants that are, at their discretion for a recommendation are usually targeted towards water project and infrastructure. They also said that a lot of times they only have a 1 week, 2 week notice for those applications to go in when the grants come to be available. I think we have within our capital projects here, a multitude of possible projects, and with the timelines to be prepared to, or we should be prepared to drop those applications as soon as the call comes out. Those are exactly the kind of projects that they mentioned that they're looking for. So specifically water and infrastructure is what she said. We try to massage her into other infrastructure kind of projects, but they said that water is her jam. So I definitely hope that we could take advantage of that in the future, given we're doing such great planning. What I always love is when residents come up to us and they say, why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you plan for that? Like, oh my gosh, why couldn't you didn't look into the future to see that was going to happen? That's exactly what we're doing right now. So a lot of people think that we are, it's just that comment's always really funny. Why didn't you think about this? I was like, that's exactly what we're doing. We're thinking about it. We're planning all the things. So of all these potential futures and planning for them financially and everything to make sure that Wellington is taken care of. So I appreciate this presentation so much. I appreciate the master planning. I look forward to this coming in front of us. I don't have any further questions. Thank you so much. Oh, you do.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I forgot to come back to you. I'm sorry.
Why don't you come back to? First of all, I want to say when Trustee Blackstone said, I thought he's going to pay for the upgrade. And then he deferred. I said, no, okay. So understanding this presentation, and thank you so much for putting this together, Nathan, and for presenting it so well and so thoroughly. One of the thoughts that I had always had is that Owl Canyon Road is a future growth area for us here. And with the VITA line potentially coming down Owl Canyon Road, and I know it's down the road before that happens. Was there any thought in the modeling about putting the storage tank somewhere closer to I-25 and Owl Canyon, maybe one of those high points or something like that, to give you the pressure zones you need for maybe any commercial or industrial growth up in that area?
Yes. So What we would be aiming for with the tank location is an elevation of about 5,550. So we need to find a site along the VITA pipeline that meets those requirements. We had previously identified a location that was east of I-25 that fit those requirements, that could then gravity feed to that 5525 upper elevation pressure zone at Owl Canyon. The latest pipeline that I had seen from VITA that was in part of their presentation shows a slightly different alignment, but as we work through those agreements with them, we'll hammer out that alignment and look for that elevation along that alignment. But that's what we're looking for, is 5,550 to gravity feed.
So
Well,
you would
Canyon.
be in the future, when the transmission line, and we get to that point, you'd be looking to put that, a storage tank, probably 1 MGD.
Yep.
Okay, somewhere on the east side of the highway there that can feed that. Because I'm thinking logistically, if you put the storage tank where the existing 1 Meagan is, then you have to pump it back up there, which is electricity and pumps and so forth, and the ongoing cost for that. So if you could find a way to gravity that, I mean, that would be something I would just want to keep in everybody's mind. I'm glad you're already thinking of that.
That's the intent, was a tank and then boost the chlorine coming out of the tank or going into the tank.
Okay.
And then we just gravity feed and not have to pump. Yeah.
All right. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Next up is the Boxelder Basin Regional Stormwater Authority update. Presentation will be by Bob Gowing, Public Works Director. He did.
He was here for VITA.
Oh,
VITA's his pet project right now. Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. I'm Bob Gowing, the Director of Public Works, and I am here to talk somewhat about the Boxelder Basin Regional Stormwater Authority. I already noticed a problem though. I can't make the slide go up for some reason. Okay. So the authority, as it's usually called, was created back in 2008. And before 2008, there was a pretty large history of flooding throughout the Boxelder and the Coal Creek watersheds. The Boxelder watershed is about 260 square miles. It's very large. It drains a portion of South Wyoming and really everything in kind of the column from the confluence of the Boxelder, which is in Fort Collins, to the Cache la Poudre, all the way up and past the Wyoming border. So it's a lot of water coming down there. And I think you guys might remember some of the discussions we've had in the past about the B dams. There is a B dam on Boxelder, that's B2, and on Coal Creek. So thank God those are there. They're very effective, really extremely effective stormwater management facilities. And so everything that we're going to talk about with the authorities projects is south of those. So B2 or B3 is just a little bit upstream of the northernmost series of projects. So back in 2008, there had already been quite a few regional, I'll call them partners, kind of a rough alliance, the major municipalities, some of the water districts and those sorts of folks, CDOT, that were looking to find a solution to some of this widespread regional flooding throughout the watershed. And that kind of led to a group of municipalities, that being Wellington, Fort Collins, and Larimer County, which is not a municipality, creating that the authority in 2008 for the specific purpose of addressing and removing some of the flood hazard in downstream areas, but really just bringing the flood waters under control to the degree possible. So that began in 08. The quick note about the governance, there's 5 directors. There's a board that was set up in that original 2008 agreement. I'm assuming that most of y'all didn't read that agreement. I don't know why you would. Any sane person would. But we have basically 1.5 representatives. There's a representative from the town, one from Fort Collins, and one from the county. And there's 2 kind of regional directors, one for the north part of the county, and the town selects that person in conjunction with the county, and the same thing happens for the south one. So our representative, as you know, is Tim Singwald for the town, and Richard Seaworth is that joint Northern Basin representative for the authority. So that they had prior to even 2008, there was a master plan that had been commissioned and completed that called for several projects. Most of those made it into the final cut. And really those projects are in kind of 2 large segments. There's a series of projects north of Wellington, if we think of Wellington as the center point of this conversation, and a series of projects south of Wellington. The ones north of Wellington that actually benefit Wellington are generally called the Coal Creek Flood Mitigation Project. And in a nutshell, what this project does is it diverts, and on this graphic on the upper left, Coal Creek runs right just east of the railroad tracks that you see in that graphic. So right there at that northwest area, there's a diversion structure that kind of spans the creek, and it collects a lot of flow. I think it's 1,700 cubic feet, yeah, and diverts it down the inlet canal, underneath the culvert and the freeway, and over to Clark Reservoir. Now, what made that possible was enlarging Inlet Canal. And by the way, both of those facilities are owned by North Pooter Irrigation Company. So they were something of a partner with these original projects. The Inlet Canal, I'll talk a little bit more about those specifically. And you can see on this one where Coal Creek is, the diversion in the Inlet Canal improvements. That cross section at the bottom, I mainly put that in there just so that you can see how engineers spell, but also to show you that the original irrigation ditch is still there, but that whole structure was widened considerably to carry those flood flows all the way down to Clark. And once it gets, and you can see on this map right here, that's Owl Canyon that's just to the north. That's the interchange of Owl Canyon that you're looking at. So it discharges east across I-25 and over to Clark, which is not a whole lot to see in this one. But the project in Clark itself included dredging of a lot of material. That's basically a wet pond, a retention ditch, reservoir, water supply reservoir, raising the spillway a little bit to create more volume that way as well. And so all that detention is required in order to release those flows, which used to come to Wellington, safely to point south over here on the east side of the freeway. So that's, sometimes you hear those called the upper basin improvements. I really just think of them as our improvements. And then the second set is kind of grouped together as the East Side Detention Facility. This actually is the detention facility, and you can see it's located just south of the golf course. That blue line is the 100-year elevation inside the pond. It's a very large detention pond. and takes those flows from the north and releases them at a greatly reduced flow rate to point south. So all of these projects benefit Fort Collins, Larimer County, and to some degree Tinmouth. But it's really only those upper basin projects that benefit us, which kind of led us to 2017 when former town administrator Cannon and Mayor Tim Singwald kind of put together that 2017 agreement and got that approved. And what that 2017 agreement does is limited our financial responsibility for the east side detention projects, and also laid out a path to ultimately dissolve the authority once certain conditions were met. And those conditions are quite lengthy, but in general, they include completing the projects, all the things that you might expect, paying off any loans, and there were some loans taken, CWCB loans for the projects, distributing assets of the authority back to the members. This is, remember this, how this is set up. The members, those three entities rather in the original IGA, they're hired the authority to run it for them. So it's the members that need to dissolve the authority because we're the ones that signed the IGA. Excuse me. So our representatives on the board of directors have been talking for quite some time about an early termination to the authority. I think you've all heard those conversations. And about, I want to say 6-8 months ago, the audit committee was kind of tasked with working through all the requirements to actually do that. And the audit committee previously had a pretty limited role. It was really review the audits and advise the members and the authority. But that mission has kind of changed a little bit, and we are starting to look at what it would take to dissolve. There's going to be some real challenges here. One of them is the operations and maintenance agreements that we have to put in place. And those, per the 08, the original IGA, have to be taken over by the county. There's some discussion about how many projects are actually part of what got built out there and what should be funded and what should not be funded. But that's kind of the path forward. And we thought it would be good to present just this brief history and some information about the authority in anticipation of our discussion about the master plan that Nathan's gonna take care in a second. So with that, I'll stand for any questions or comments.
I'm just going to open this up to volunteers. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Trustee Kenneth.
Yes, thank you, Bob. Good job encapsulating the past, 18 years of.
That was like the molecule on top of the iceberg right there.
There's a lot more that goes on beyond all that. I got a couple of questions for you. First of all, the East Side Detention Facility, did they ever resolve the groundwater that they exposed? And so they can eliminate the augmentation plan?
They did. They have one final phase of that under drain that was the proposed solution back then. And they anticipate having that done by the end of this year.
Okay.
So that would represent the last. They also have settled some of the lawsuits around the potential impact to the wells and things of that sort. So that would be the last thing from a project point of view that needs to happen before the authority could be dissolved.
Okay. The other question I had was the 2017 amendment to the agreement talked about sharing responsibilities, and the town actually gave up their responsibility for the east side detention. Tinmouth took it. But in exchange, we took pretty much sole responsibility for Clark Reservoir. And I know that the original IGA talks about, the need for future dredging and so forth, so we can maintain that volume for floodwater retention. There was some discussion, no, 7 or 8 years ago, about possibly the Clark Reservoir, about creating a forebay at the north end of that. They can catch the sediment to reduce the amount of sedimentation that can build up in Clark Reservoir. Has there been any more discussion about that at all?
So in terms of the whole series of Clark Reservoir projects, we're responsible for 50% moving forward. Fort Collins is 25 and the county's 25. And that includes establishing kind of an O&M escrow fund of $1 million for future projects. And the project that you mentioned is got a real potential. It's the agreement with North Pooter calls for that to be dredged if it meets certain trigger points.
Right.
And that would be a very expensive project, probably more than 1 million. So that's one of the things we're talking about with our partners is what is the right amount of money to have in there for that, and when might that be needed, and how would we replenish that in the future? The original plan was for these escrow accounts to kind of fund themselves. In other words, the interest on this money sitting in the account would pay for the projects, but I think everybody realizes now that that was probably a little bit optimistic in terms of the amount of interest that would get created, but also how that might work. So another thing about Clark is that, and you'll probably remember this, is that the true up part of it, where our overpayments to the authority or theoretical overpayments to the authority would be reimbursed to us. And that 2017 agreement calls for that. Any kind of reimbursement that we get has to go to Clark, has to go into the Clark escrow fund. So we're also talking about what that might look like as well.
Well, that was my last question too, was about the true up, because that was a major portion of the 2017 agreement.
Yeah.
For a little background information, Wellington is the only municipality that's entirely inside of the Boxelder Stormwater Authority footprint. Fort Collins has a little bit of it, and Larimer County has a pretty good chunk of it too. But at the time, Wellington was growing. We were the second fastest growing community in Colorado in 2017. So the amount of money that the town was paying to the authority was leaps and bounds above what the original agreement said. And what the town wanted to do was to address that extra money that we were putting in, so we can have our fair share. So one of the 2017 agreement was really about, okay, we have an obligation to continue to make these payments based on that 2018. But based on the cost of the projects and so forth, that the extra money that we put in when the authority is closed, there'd be this true up. And the true up would mean that extra money would come then back to the town and go toward Clark Reservoir.
That's a perfect example of the kind of the details that still need to be worked out. Where does that money land? How does it get back into Clark? When does it get back into the Clark O&M fund? So just a lot of financial elements to this as well that we have our needs and concerns. Well, all of our partners have the same thing. So it's gonna take a little while for us to work out something that works for everybody, because to dissolve takes a unanimous vote of all the members.
I do want to just raise attention to the water, that line item that you would see on your utility bill. So it's water, sewage, wastewater, stormwater, and the Boxelder fee is what you would see in your utility bill. So when we're talking about the money associated with that and where it's coming from, all of us are contributing to it, every household. So every single month. Yes, sir. Yes, please.
I'm going to start with a comment, if you don't mind. Tell me if I'm wrong, but when you say 100-year flood, that doesn't mean that it is a flood that's going to happen every 100 years. There's a 1% chance on any given year that a flood of that magnitude can happen, right? I would also go out on a limb and say that these 100-year floods are becoming more common. And I would even be curious if the town is, these programs are thinking about those 1,000-year floods, because those are even more catastrophic to towns, and I just think that there should be a certain degree of alarm, and I appreciate that this work has been done, because these are very real problems. You go down in the fourth column, just below that Dairy Queen, you can see along the river there, they have a pole. You can see how high the water came up with one of their floods, and it wrecked so much. Like CSU, it went into their engineering department. It's wild, but how much they can cross up. I think that's really neat to see. So I just kind of wanted to say that if anybody was seeing 100-year floods, like, well, why would I worry about that? I'm not gonna live that one.
Good point.
And I think you may have touched on it. I'm just curious if, you know, the fees that we are paying for the Boxelder stormwater program, if the solution happens, is there consideration? You may have touched on it. It's a little bit above my grade, but transitioning that into just like our stormwater program, is that what you guys were touching on?
Well, I think what we do is do a cost of service study, you know, at that, or update the current fee study for the drainage utility. And with the information that came out of the master plan, our needs, your feedback on those needs, and is it robust enough or not in terms of flood control protection for Wellington residents and businesses. So yes, yet to come, but we certainly are kind of thinking of it a little bit more as a clean slate, in the sense that, okay, that $6 is gone, but now we understand some of the other needs for the town. And so we're really looking kind of towards the future to try and set this up for success throughout the coming decades.
Just to add, the 2025 rate and fee study did include stormwater, and it does include projections in there of a dissolution date, which is not going to come to fruition based on the assumptions in that plan. But it did have the planning at that point was that in lieu of keeping the customers from seeing additional rate increases or a change in their rates, we wouldn't do away with that. They would just transition to start coming to the town at that point to pay for what Nathan will talk about next.
Yeah. Tis the next conversation of, well, exactly kind of
Oh, perfect. Well, then, thank you.
consider that. Any other questions for this presentation?
I have my Rose moment that I'll show you.
All right, thank you so much. We're just going to roll into, based on the audience in front of us, the Stormwater Master Plan Project Prioritization with our presenter, Nathan Ewert, Deputy Public Works Director.
Take a minute here.
He's doing so good.
He is.
So
He's doing great. All right. So Nathan Ewert, Deputy Director of Public Works. Oddly enough, I was also the project manager for this project. It was one of the first things I worked on when I came to the town 5 years ago. So it's kind of odd to be talking about it again. So I think, you know, Bob kind of addressed this, and so did Meagan in responding to Trustee Blackstone's question. This is sort of meant to be a presentation of the projects that were identified within the master plan, and these are projects that could potentially then be funded if and when the Boxelder Authority goes away and the drainage fund fee is reanalyzed, and future date, whatever that may be. So I'll jump way back. The master plan was completed in 2023 by Icon Engineering. It evaluated a range of potential mitigation strategies intended to reduce flood risks, improve drainage system performance, and support future development within both town limits and the growth management area. The alternatives analysis provided the framework for prioritization. Thank you, Nick. I'm so bad at changing
Advancing.
slides. I know. Um, now, like what?
Now we gotta start over.
I know. Framework for prioritizing future stormwater capital improvements and establishes a long-term strategy for addressing identified drainage deficiencies. The primary objective of the alternatives analysis was to identify practical and cost-effective solutions that would improve stormwater conveyance, reduce flooding impacts to homes and businesses, and bring the town's drainage infrastructure into compliance with current stormwater design criteria. Particular emphasis was placed on reducing flood risks to insurable structures. Throughout the evaluation process, town staff worked closely with the project team to establish design criteria, review potential mitigation strategies, and identify constraints within the existing public right-of-way, minimizing impacts to private property and reducing implementation complexity. The alternatives can be put into two broad categories. I call it the Old Town alternatives, which are within the existing historical developments, also known as Old Town Wellington, and then also GMA alternatives that are located within undeveloped areas of the GMA. I hope when I say GMA, it's growth management area. I don't know that I've said that yet tonight. The final design and construction of these GMA alternatives is typically handled through development as part of the development process. I did want to briefly touch on what an outfall is, because you're going to see that kind of used loosely throughout this presentation. An outfall is just a system of pipes, storm drains, channels that convey water from one location to a natural drainage feature such as Boxelder Creek or Coal Creek. With that, I'll jump straight into talking about a little bit about the projects. If you do read the master plan, which is available on the town's website, you will see a lot of discussion about the different variations within each project. Most of the variations are based off of the design storm being used. Trustee Blackstone brought up a great point. The 100-year nomenclature typically isn't used any longer because it is it implies, a 100-year reoccurrence, and that's not really true. So we do usually use the 1% or 0.1% or whatever that fraction may be when describing the storm events. However, since I'm used to it tonight, I'm going to stick to saying 2-year and 10-year storm events. I don't know the math there. Sorry. Starting with Washington Avenue outfall. This is a large box culvert upstream of the Windsor Ditch on the north side of Washington Avenue. This is envisioned to convey runoff from the Bonfire subdivision and future development north of Washington Avenue, and provides conveyance of Coal Creek flows that are coming into town over to the Boxelder Creek rather than through Old Town. This is probably the most expensive alternative that was considered during the project. I would consider this to be partially development driven, as there is an undeveloped lot up there that would have to do something, because there is a large floodplain and ponding area that was identified that occurs on that property. So in order to develop it, the floodplain would need to be addressed, and it could be through participation in this project. Next project is the Boxelder Business Park outfall. Similar to the Washington Avenue outfall, this project is envisioned to intercept Coal Creek flows north of town and convey them to Boxelder Creek. This one is smaller in scope. It can also be development driven if development comes in north of the Boxelder Business Park. Similarly, it includes a large diameter culvert from Coal Creek over to Boxelder Creek. Many of these projects were envisioned to work in conjunction with each other rather than one large stormwater conveyance structure. We take a little bite out of it at every chance we get, so that we don't have such a large capital investment all at once. However, this one is also the second most expensive project. And typically those costs come from just trying to tunnel underneath the train tracks. With large diameter culverts, you're looking more at like a micro tunnel rather than just a bore. So the next slide would be the Garfield Avenue outfall. This one is the first Old Town project on the list. There is an existing storm drain system along Garfield. When it was analyzed back in 2023, it was determined to have additional capacity. That additional capacity could be utilized through installation of multiple inlets along the alignment. This would alleviate some localized flooding within Garfield upstream of Cleveland Avenue. This is actually one of the more cheaper of all the project or cheapest of all the projects, with your primary cost coming from putting the road back together and putting the sidewalks back together. But there's no new pipe that's going into the ground. It's just new inlets. Next project. This one's very familiar. Technically started this week. The Cleveland Avenue outfall, which is part of the Cleveland Avenue reconstruction project. It was in the master plan. It was envisioned in the master plan. If you read the master plan report, you'll see there's several alternatives that are identified. You know, perhaps taking it rather to Coal Creek, it's going to the west to Boxelder Creek. There's an alternative where it takes it down 3rd Street and then to the Lincoln Avenue outfall. This is a good example of how these projects come to fruition. When we got the grant money for the Cleveland Avenue project, we knew the storm drain needed to be a part of it. We still had Icon on board finishing up the master plan project. They went ahead and looked at all the alternatives, as well as the town's design criteria, as well as the additional hydraulic restrictions stipulated by CDOT for the storm drain outfall. And
Really?
if you talk about stormwater, it will come. So from there, Icon kind of took all the alternatives, distilled it down into a report, which was, you know, basically their recommendation of the preferred alignment. Town staff reviewed it, myself, Bob, as well as CDOT Hydraulics, and it was approved. And since then, it's been part of the construction project and is currently under construction. As of this week, they put the first piece of the storm drain in the ground. I should note, because it's on the next slide, this project also includes, this project includes the 5th Street outfall, which was in the master plan, as well as stub outs for the proposed 6th Street outfall. So as we're building, we're looking to incorporate pieces of the other projects as we can, so we're not having to basically start from scratch with these other projects. Moving on, the 6th Street outfall. This was envisioned as collecting stormwater runoff north of Cleveland along 6th Street, primarily looking at a drainage outfall for the Timig and Church properties, those empty parcels across from the iStone campuses. This is envisioned to tie into the 5th Street outfall north of Cleveland. Like I said, the stub outs will be installed later this month, as the stub outs will get us outside of CDOT right of way, and then we don't have to worry about CDOT permitting for this future project. The next next project is within Old Town. It's in May Court. There is an existing 12-inch diameter RCP there. The idea behind this is to increase the pipe size to allow for more capacity, more conveyance, and less localized flooding on the streets through there. This is a small cost project, but it really only impacts this small little area on South 3rd Street. Next project is the Sveta Lane outfall. This one is an interesting Old Town project in that it could potentially be constructed in coordination with some development. This is an identified problem area along Coal Creek where runoff outfalls to the historic channel, but then there is no conveyance to get that runoff to the channel that kind of starts south of Jefferson and east of Ridley's. There's just a gap in stormwater conveyance in this 2-block section. There's also a large floodplain piece through here. Those two lots located on Savetta are zoned commercial, I believe, at the corner of Sixth Street and Jefferson, and Savetta's in there as well. We've had several conversations with developers, and this always kind of seems to be a sticking point through here as far as getting these two lots developed. So there could be potential for partnership with a development. Obviously, to mitigate the floodplain, you're looking at more of a FEMA process with a CLOMR and LOMR, but it's all doable.
Too many letters.
Conditional letter of map revision and letter of map revision. Thank you, Meagan. So you do the conditional saying this is what we're gonna do, and then you do the letter afterwards saying this is what we did, and the maps should change now. FEMA, please change your floodplain. It's a intensive process. Another project identified is the Buffalo Creek Wellington Community Park area. This is intended to address flooding along Wild West Lane and Buffalo Creek Parkway intersections. This would construct a new storm drain segment as well as install new inlets and upsize existing storm drain pipe. I think with this project, it's important to note that this will not address the residential structures within Buffalo Creek that are located within the floodplain. To adequately address that issue, you're looking at a new structure under Washington Avenue with Boxelder, because that's mostly backwater from the Boxelder Creek. Now moving on to the to the GMA projects. I don't want to spend too much time on these. These are really development driven projects. They're not needed. They're not going to come into any sort of fruition until developments come in. The best example is the Saddleback outfall. When those plans were going through the development process, the master plan was already completed. The Saddleback outfall through Saddleback is in the approved plan set. So that portion of the channel will be constructed with Saddleback. There's a portion of it north of Ronald Reagan that's yet to that would come to fruition when a development comes through on the north side of Ronald Reagan there. Now to touch briefly on what I kind of mentioned at the start, there's a lot of discussion about the alternatives being split into alternative 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and they're referencing minor storm conveyance of the 2-year storm event. What they reference as flood mitigation is really the 10-year storm event. And then, as I said earlier, floodplains are based on the 100-year storm event or the 1%. There's different variations for all these projects within here. I guess for reference, I should add that residential developments must detain the 2-year and the 100-year historical events. Detain the events and release them at the 2-year and 100-year historical rate. Commercial, it's the 10-year and 100-year design events. And then new streets are required to design for the minor and major event, which is the 2-year and the 100-year. So really the only thing we're not getting to is that 100-year design event, just because that's really cost prohibitive. There's not a lot of those designs unless they're specifically intended to be flood control structures like the B dams. 100-year event's just not a design storm for this type of infrastructure. I did go ahead and list out the report recommendations. They've classified them as high prioritization, medium prioritization, and low prioritization. I think it's interesting. Cleveland's in there, kind of on the lower end, but we've gone ahead and we've started that one. But the Fifth Street outfall is in there as a high priority, and it's under construction. And then obviously the GMA projects are kind of on the low side, and the smaller localized flooding projects within Old Town as well, just because of the number of homes and structures impacted. It's not as impactful. With that, I will stand for questions, comments. If there's anything that maybe you all have identified, the board has identified that we should look into, I'd be willing to do that as well. these were the projects identified in the master plan, but there certainly could be others out there that, perhaps were missed. And I'd take that feedback now.
So obviously Cleveland Avenue wasn't a high priority, but we had the opportunity in which the road would be pulled up. So why would you not do that for cost savings and to finish that project and avoid tearing up a road in the future? Right? So in my mind, those are the kind of opportunities maybe that we should look for. And I don't know how this works. So I guess this is my question is, we've been talking about undergrounding of power. I don't think power and water necessarily go together, but I assume they go under the same streets. So are those the kind of projects that we could combine and look from a priority perspective on those kind of projects?
So typically power, we don't want that anywhere near our infrastructure.
Yeah.
So those go in utility easements, public
Okay.
utility easements outside the street right of way where we can get them. I know there's a project on Ronald Reagan right now that Excel's doing.
Uh-huh.
That's going in the Ronald Reagan right of way just because there isn't a utility easement to put them in
Okay.
other than backyards, and we weren't going to put that high power line in a backyard. But I think the goal is the way we envision this on the engineering side is to look for places where we can team up and do a water, a storm, a sanitary project, any two of the three at the same time as perhaps a street mill and overlay project. Similar to what we're doing right now on Fifth Street with a water line and a storm drain line, when you can cost share those pave back or the paving costs between multiple projects and multiple funds, it helps things out and helps kind of reduce those upfront costs. It's a goal of ours to get all of these projects, the stormwater master plan, there is a sanitary sewer master plan, and the distribution master plan all in the same data set and on the same map. And then when we overlay that with our street pavement classification index, that's really going to help us inform projects moving forward, because then we can see where streets need to be paved. And while we're paving, let's get the water line done. Let's get the storm or the sanitary sewer done. That's the goal.
That makes sense. I think that's a great tool. The only thing I see in the high prioritization, and maybe I don't understand that, is the Wellington Community Park in Buffalo Creek. From my understanding is you want the parks to flood, right? So is that preventing Buffalo Creek flooding or what's the case for that one?
It's addressing flooding at that intersection of Wild West and Buffalo Creek Parkway, I think is the street's called. And then it takes the runoff and then puts it in that kind of big bowl north of where Boxelder goes under the Washington Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. We'll take questions by volunteer this time in case there's not too many. Yes, please.
In terms of other projects possibly to prioritize or at least add to the list, I know with Safe Routes to School, we've been in communication with the transportation team there, and recently within the last month or so, they've reached out about some possible projects around Rice and the intersections there, particularly right around the school and pedestrian pathways. So I'd love to connect with you offline about that.
Sure.
Any other? Yes, sir.
It's a general question just for residents. Is there a place where folks can get access to like a floodplain map so they can see where their house lays on the sort of stuff that you kind of points or people do? Yeah. Is that the best?
It's an interesting, this is going to be a long answer. It's an interesting time right now because there are new maps coming out that go effective November 27th. So we will be going through, you'll see me here in October and going through updating the ordinance, officially adopting the maps.
Yep.
Those maps, I have hard copies. They can always, we have to have hard copies of the maps. And residents can come into the municipal services building and they can call me over. They can shoot me an email. We can set up a time. and we can go over the maps, the hard copy maps. There is the FEMA website, FEMA Map Service Center is typically where I go, and you can throw in your address and it'll show you your the floodplain at your residence. There's another resource, coloradohazardmapping.com. That's by CWCB. But I used to tell people to go there, but as I've been looking to see if it's updated with the new maps, I'm finding that it's not. And I've sent them an email months ago saying, hey, your maps don't reflect the latest mapping, and I haven't seen them change anything. So I would caution against using coloradohazardmapping.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, again, especially as it's pouring outside. And I would just recommend, especially as people are, buying houses in Wellington, and just out of curiosity, as we're kind of talking about this is something that folks, if you own a home or rent, you should look up and find out where your house is at. So yeah, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just it's funny. We had the Boxelder Stormwater Authority meeting, and then we have the drainage meeting here, and both of our representatives for the Boxelder Stormwater Authority say it's never going to flood here, but we get 14 inches a year. But I will point out that about 1 or 2 years after Wellington was incorporated, downtown had 18 inches of standing water. There was a major flood back then. 1907. 2013. No, we haven't had one that soon. With some of the development end, I'm just going to plant a little seed here. As the board starts considering options for things like economic development, and we may have discussions about URAs, DDAs, and so forth like that, that becomes a resource that we can use to also address the infrastructure needs for commercial development, to offset some of those costs, so that it makes it easier for the developer and for the town to meet in the middle to get some of this done. So there's a lot of options about how to get some of these projects done. But I just want to say I appreciate all of this, and I appreciate what you were talking about, piggybacking with other and overlaying different maps and so forth. The Garfield outfall that currently exists was built in 2017, 2018, and we had and the town had a road maintenance budget, but they used some drainage funds, and on Garfield they not only replaced the road, but they put that outfall board underneath there. So it did save a lot of money from having two separate projects where you're cutting into the road two different times. So good presentation. Thank you.
Trustee Barrett.
Hi. So I do appreciate the Sveta Lane outfall as a high priority. I do want to emphasize that, we have pinpointed the pedestrian overpass by Jefferson over there. And if we can somehow, correlate that with that, I just think that is really important, that we do have commercial opportunities there, especially ones that we get the overpass. So I can definitely appreciate that one a lot. I think that would impact, the east side. This is a huge one for the east side, so I definitely would put that on my top priority there. But also based on the timeline for, of course, the overpass.
Thank you. I appreciate that we have studied this and we're planning for this, because that way, when we do have those development opportunities to share costs potentially, or, have those issues mitigated. So again, another opportunity that we are taking advantage of for great planning, to understand the situation which we're doing that, and then we can also prepare people development wise to know exactly what they're dealing with as well. So again, I appreciate our planning. I don't have any specific priorities or changes that I would recommend. Obviously, I feel like this is very well informed, and I think we know better, do better in this kind of scenario. So I really appreciate this presentation. Any other final comments on this? Other than, can everybody please knock wood for me? Just
We said a lot of not good things tonight. I just want to make sure we're not, just because we planned for it doesn't mean we
Brought up all kinds
want
of
it to happen. So
So if I close my windows.
it's good to be prepared and to understand, and we're doing that to take care of our town, obviously, but we want to never wish it upon anybody who lives here or elsewhere. So, and a lot of communities across the country are really dealing with their worst case scenario right now. So I'm glad that we are proactively planning and taking care of Wellington. So thank you all so much, and I really appreciate that. That is the last item on our working session agenda for the evening. Are there any other items, Ms. Garcia, that we need to talk about? Okay, everybody have fun leaving. It's very wet outside.